The night shift at Hartwell Logistics ended at 11:15, which meant Jack Mercer was always home by midnight. Give or take the buses, he didn't own a car. He used to a second-hand Chevy Malibu, with a temperamental heater and a crack in the windshield that spread another inch every winter. That went away 2 years ago. Around the same time everything else did. The steady salary, the health insurance, the house with the 2-car garage in a neighborhood where the lawns stayed green. Now he had an apartment on Callaway Street, 3rd floor, window facing a brick wall. He had a fold-out sofa he slept on so his daughter could have the bedroom. He had a job hauling packages in a cold warehouse from 3 in the afternoon until 11 at night. And on weekends he worked security at a strip mall 20 minutes north. He had a bus pass. He had about $47 until Friday. He had Emma. Emma was 8 years old, gap-toothed, and possessed of a seriousness that sometimes made Jack think she had been born middle-aged. She read library books the way other children watched television, lying on her stomach with her chin propped on both fists. Working through the pages, with the focused calm of a person solving a problem that mattered. She liked dinosaurs and weather patterns and anything to do with maps. She did not like mayonnaise, or the sound of car alarms, or the boy at school named Derek, who said mean things at recess. She was already asleep when Jack got home most nights, and he would stand in the doorway of her room for a moment, never long, just enough to confirm she was there, that her chest still rose and fell, that the small fact of her continued before he went and made himself a bowl of cereal at the kitchen counter in the dark. That was his life. It was not a dramatic life. It did not feel particularly noble from the inside. It was a sequence of small indignities, navigated quietly, punctuated by bus transfers and late fees and conversations with supervisors, who spoke to him the way people speak to someone they are preparing to fire. His manager at Hartwell, a man named Dennis, who smelled of vending machine coffee and resentment, had twice this month made comments about Jack's scan speed in front of the rest of the floor crew. Both times Jack had said nothing. Both times he had felt something flatten inside him. The way a tin can sounds when you step on it. He had learned to absorb these things. Dennis was not a bad man exactly. He was a man who had found a small territory of authority and defended it with the energy of someone defending something valuable. He did not know, and would not have particularly cared to know, that the quiet man in Bay 7 who never pushed back had spent 11 years in service that Dennis could not have imagined and would not have been capable of performing. That was fine. The past was another country. Jack had a passport, but no reason to travel there. What he missed, sometimes not often, and he was careful about this, was the clarity, not the danger, which people from the outside romanticized and which was up close. Simply the ongoing management of something you very badly did not want to get wrong, but the clarity, the sense of a task defined by something more than a scan quota, the experience of being in a room with people who trusted him absolutely because they had seen what he was capable of, and he had seen what they were, and that kind of knowledge bonds people in ways that ordinary life cannot replicate. He had traded that for Emma, which was not a sacrifice in any grievable sense. Emma was not a consolation. She was the point. But sometimes, on the long bus rides, he felt the contour of what had been exchanged, not regretfully, just accurately, the way you might run your thumb along a scar, not because it hurts, but because it is there. His ex-wife, Carrie, had moved to Phoenix with a man named Greg who worked in insurance and coached youth soccer on weekends. This was entirely fine. Carrie was kind, and Emma loved her, and they video called on Sundays. And Jack harbored nothing against her or Greg, who, from everything he could tell, was a decent person doing his best. The divorce had not been dramatic. There had been no betrayal, no cataclysm, only the accumulated evidence that two people can care about each other and still be fundamentally wrong about having a life together. And at some point, it becomes kinder to acknowledge this than to continue pretending otherwise. Emma had handled it with the gravity and flexibility of someone for whom facts were facts. She had been 5. She had asked 2 questions. Would she still see both of them? Yes. Would the cat come to whichever house she was at? They did not have a cat, which she had noted as a problem requiring a separate conversation. The cat conversation was still ongoing, technically. It hadn't always been this way. There were people from an earlier chapter of his life, people he no longer spoke to, who would have found the current version of Jack Mercer nearly unrecognizable. The quiet, the compliance, the careful way he kept his head down. They would not have understood it. Some of them would have laughed, but that was another life, and he had put it away carefully, the way you put away something dangerous that you no longer trust yourself to handle. Emma made it worth it. Every morning she woke him up by standing beside the sofa and saying, in the measured tone of someone delivering a formal briefing, the three most important facts she had learned the previous day. Yesterday it had been, 1. That the tongue of a blue whale weighs as much as an elephant. 2. That thunder is the sound of air expanding rapidly. And 3. That the word disaster originally meant bad star, from the belief that misfortune was caused by unfavorable planetary alignments. Bad star, Jack had repeated, still half asleep. Emma had nodded gravely. Latin. He had gotten up and made her oatmeal and watched her read while she ate, and that had been enough to make the rest of the day worth walking through. That Tuesday in October, the shift had been ugly. 3 pallets mislabeled, which was not his fault but which Dennis implied was, in the simmering, passive-aggressive way Dennis had, of implying things without saying them. A coworker named Ray had borrowed Jack's utility knife and returned it with a broken blade and a shrug. The vending machine had eaten his $1.50 and dispensed nothing. He left at 11:14 and walked to the bus stop. The rain started as he waited. He didn't have an umbrella. He had owned one until last spring, when Emma had taken it to school on a rainy Monday and left it on the bus, and he had told her it was perfectly all right. So he stood at the bus stop in the rain and waited, which was fine. He was used to it. The rain was cold, and the street was mostly empty, and a man in a BMW slowed down, looked at him standing there in his warehouse jacket, and kept driving, which was also fine. The number 14 came 9 minutes late. He rode it to Meridian Avenue and got off and began the 4-block walk to Callaway Street, through the kind of October rain that does not fall so much as fill the air, a cold, persistent, settling rain that had no drama to it and required no response, only endurance. He turned down the alley that cut 2 minutes off his walk. That was when he heard her. He almost didn't turn around. That was the honest truth of it. And Jack would think about it later in the weeks and months afterward. When people had constructed a clean narrative around that night, a story about instinct and heroism and the kind of man he was, he would think about the 2 seconds he had stood there with his hands in his jacket pockets and considered walking on. He had Emma at home. He had his job. He had no savings and no plan and no margin for anything going wrong, and trouble in an alley at 11:30 at night had no upside for a man in his situation. He knew this with the clear, practical intelligence of someone who had been making survival calculations for 2 years. He heard the voice again. "Please, I just need you to." Then something harder. A laugh. Low and purposeful. Jack turned around. The alley was lit at the far end by a streetlight that was losing its argument with the rain. 2 men, one large and one larger, had a woman pressed against the brick wall between a dumpster and a service door. The woman was in her late 30s. He guessed dark coat, dark hair, the kind of quality clothes you recognize even in bad lighting. She had her bag clutched in front of her with both hands, which told him they wanted the bag, or thought they did. One of the men had his hand against the wall beside her head. Casual, proprietary. The posture of someone who had done this before and found it unremarkable. Jack stood at the entrance to the alley for 1 more second. Then, he walked in. The rain came with him. His footsteps were quiet, not deliberately, just naturally, the way they always were. The 2 men didn't notice him until he was close enough that turning back would have been obvious. He stopped about 10 feet away. "Stop." His voice came out low and even. Not loud. Not shaking. The rain absorbed it. The way rain absorbs everything. The larger of the 2 men, heavy-set, mid-30s, jacket with a team logo Jack didn't recognize, turned first. He looked at Jack with the expression of a man who has been mildly interrupted, taking inventory. The warehouse jacket, the wet hair, the $40 boots, the general aspect of someone who rides the bus. The calculation happened quickly, the way these calculations always do, and the conclusion it reached was predictable. "Keep walking," the man said. Jack did not keep walking. "Stop." And then, with a flatness that surprised even him, "You bastards." The second man turned now too. He was leaner than the first, with the look of someone who stayed in shape, for practical reasons. Not vanity, not health, but utility. The kind of physique you develop when your physical capability has practical applications in your line of work. He said nothing. He just looked at Jack the way you look at an obstacle you're deciding whether to step over or through. The woman had gone very still against the wall. She was looking at Jack with an expression he couldn't quite read, not relief, not exactly. Something more complicated. Something that was paying close attention. The first man spread his hands slightly. A theatrical gesture of patience. "Friend, this doesn't have anything to do with you. Walk away, and we all have a better evening." Jack was aware of the distances. 10 feet to the larger man, 14 to the lean one, who had shifted slightly to his left. He was aware of the dumpster as a potential cover problem, and the service door as a variable locked or unlocked. He couldn't be certain. He was aware that the alley had one entrance behind him and one ahead, and that the lean one was angled toward the forward entrance. He did these calculations without thinking about them, the way a reader processes words without thinking about letters. "I'm not going anywhere," Jack said. The first man smiled. It was a wide, unhurried smile. "You sure about this, friend?" Jack was standing in the rain with his hands at his sides, and he thought about Emma asleep in their apartment 4 blocks away, and he thought about the sound of that woman's voice against the brick, and he said nothing. He took one step forward. The smile on the first man's face did something small and involuntary. A flicker. Not fear exactly, not yet, but the kind of recalibration that happens when something doesn't respond the way it was supposed to, when the variable you assigned a value to turns out to hold a different one. "Walk away," the lean one said. "Last time." Jack looked at him steadily. "No," he said. The first man came at him. It was not a sophisticated attack. It was the kind of forward motion that worked on most people. Most of the time, because most people did not want to be hit and would flinch or step back. Jack did neither. He moved. Not dramatically, not the way it happens in movies where the hero sweeps around in a wide arc with perfect form, and everyone stands still long enough to admire it. What Jack did was quieter and stranger than that. He shifted his weight, slightly and precisely, and the larger man's reaching arm missed him by about 4 inches. And Jack was suddenly beside the man rather than in front of him, and then the man was stumbling forward and down, and it had happened so fast that for a moment the lean one just stared. The lean one was better. He had faster instincts, and he came in low, which was sensible, and for a few seconds it was genuinely difficult. Jack's shoulder caught a hard impact, and he felt it in his back teeth, but he had taken harder than that, in places considerably less hospitable than a wet alley in a mid-sized city, and the muscle memory in his arms and legs had its own opinion about what happened next. The lean one ended up seated against the dumpster, looking confused, with his right wrist held at an angle that made him breathe in sharp and shallow. The large one was still on the ground. Jack stepped back and stood with the rain coming down on him and his breathing only slightly elevated. And for a moment no one in the alley moved. The woman had her back against the brick wall, and she was watching him with a different expression now. Alert. Focused. Reading him in a way that felt less like fear and more like assessment. The large man sat up slowly. There was something working behind his eyes. Jack watched it happen, and then the man looked down at Jack's forearm, where the warehouse jacket had pulled back during the struggle to reveal about 2 inches of ink. Military, not decorative. The kind of design that means something specific to people who know what they're looking at. The man's expression changed. He grabbed his associate by the jacket and said something low and quick. And then they were moving, not running. That would have been too obvious, but moving with purpose toward the far end of the alley, and in 30 seconds they were gone. The rain filled the silence they left. Jack stood still for a moment, listening. When he was satisfied with what he heard, which was nothing, he turned to the woman. "Are you hurt?" She looked at him for a long moment before she answered. In that moment, he noticed several things. That she was not shaking the way someone shakes after a genuine fright, but rather the way someone shakes when adrenaline has nowhere to go. That her coat was expensive but had a small scuff on the shoulder, where she'd been pressed against the brick. That she was looking at him with the careful attention of someone used to evaluating people quickly and accurately. "No," she said. And then, with a precision that surprised him, "You have formal training." It wasn't a question. Jack picked up her bag from the wet ground where it had fallen and held it out to her. "Are you all right to walk?" he asked. "I can call someone." She took the bag slowly, still watching him. "Who are you?" "Nobody in particular," Jack said. "Do you need a cab?" Her phone was already in her hand, a sleek, matte black thing, and she was looking at it the way people look at something they're deciding not to use. She looked up at him again. "My name is Nora," she said. "Jack," he said. "Where were you going?" He pointed in the direction he'd been heading. "Home." She nodded once, as if this confirmed something. Then she said, "Thank you, Jack." He nodded back. He would have left then. He was 4 blocks from his apartment, and it was nearly midnight, and he needed to be up at 7 to get Emma ready for school. He would have said good night and turned and walked, and that would have been the end of it, a thing that happened one Tuesday in October, filed away and not spoken of. But then the black SUV appeared at the end of the alley. 2 of them, actually. They came in from Meridian Avenue, moving at the focused speed of vehicles that do not worry about inconveniencing other traffic. The doors opened before they fully stopped, and the men who came out were not in a hurry, but moved with the particular efficiency of people who have been professionally trained to move through the world without wasting anything, not time, not space, not attention. 4 men, dark coats. The kind of build that comes from years of specific conditioning. The one in front looked past Jack with rapid professional assessment, cataloged the alley in about 2 seconds, and said, "Miss Whitfield." "Are you injured?" Nora Whitfield. Jack had heard that name. He wasn't certain in what context, a headline maybe, or something Emma had mentioned while reading one of her library books about how things worked, but the name landed with the soft, specific weight of a name that occupies space in the world. "I'm fine, Marcus," she said. "Stand down." Marcus did not entirely stand down, but he moved in a way that was slightly less like an incoming event. His eyes went to Jack, and they stayed there with the focused neutrality of someone deciding whether Jack was a problem. Jack looked back at him. "He's not a threat," Nora said. "He helped me." Marcus's expression shifted by approximately nothing, but something in the quality of his attention changed. He looked at Jack the way professionals look at other professionals, not friendly, but revised. One of the other men had already retreated to make a quiet phone call. He came back and said something low to Marcus, who listened, and then looked at Jack again with an expression that had moved a small but meaningful distance from neutrality. Nora turned to Jack. "Mr. Mercer," she said. He went still. She had his name. He had given her only his first name, and she had his last. "How? You're on record with Hartwell Logistics. Your badge swipe shows you left 11 minutes ago." She held up the phone briefly. "Forgive the intrusion. I needed to verify." He looked at her. She met his eyes without apology. "Verify what?" he said. "That you were what you appeared to be," she said. "Which you are." "Mostly." He waited. "Former Army Ranger," she said. "3rd Battalion, 75th. Honorably discharged 6 years ago. 1 daughter, 8 years old. Currently employed at Hartwell Logistics and Pinnacle Security Solutions, the latter on weekends." She paused. "You were receiving treatment through the VA for a shoulder injury, but stopped attending appointments 14 months ago." Jack's jaw was tight. "I apologize," she said again. "I needed to be certain. In my position, the alternative is more dangerous." He understood this, conceptually. He didn't particularly like it. "What position is that?" he said. Though he was beginning to have an idea, she looked at him for a moment, as if deciding how much to give him, and in what order. "My car is here," she said. We can talk if you'd like, or not. Either way, you have my genuine gratitude, Jack. What you did tonight was not a small thing. He thought about the apartment 4 blocks away, about Emma and her morning briefing, about the fact that it was nearly midnight. I need to get home, he said. Nora Whitfield nodded once. Of course, she said. And then, may I have your number? I'd like to follow up. No obligation. He gave it to her, because something in the way she'd said no obligation suggested she meant it. And because there was a quality to her attention that made him want to find out what she was actually thinking. The SUVs left. The alley was empty. Jack walked home in the rain. He told her some of it. Not the next morning in the morning she had a science test and needed to be at school by 7:45, and there was a permission slip somewhere in her backpack for a field trip that needed to be found and signed. He scrambled eggs, and she ate them while explaining, without apparent segue, that the Coriolis effect was the reason storms in the northern hemisphere rotate counterclockwise. But that evening, after dinner, when they were sitting on the floor doing a puzzle of the solar system, it was missing Neptune. It was always missing Neptune, he told her about the alley. He told it carefully, the way he always told her things. Honest but edited, giving her the facts without the weight he himself assigned to them. 2 men trying to frighten a woman. He had helped. They had left. Emma listened without looking up from the puzzle, fitting Jupiter's storm eye into place. Were you scared? She asked. A little, he said. This was true, but you helped anyway. Yes, she considered this. That's what brave means, she said, in the matter-of-fact tone of someone reporting a definition. It's not that you weren't scared, it's that you helped anyway. He looked at her for a moment. Yeah, he said. I think that's right. She found Saturn's ring piece and examined it. Who was the woman? Someone important, I think. She works at a company. What company? He didn't know enough to say, so he said. Emma nodded, filing this away. Did she say thank you? She did. Good. Neptune was still missing. Is she going to call? He thought about this. Maybe. Emma looked up at him with the steady gray eyes that were entirely her mother's and said, You should talk to her if she calls, Dad. Not everything that seems like it could go wrong actually does. Jack put a planet in the wrong place, and she moved it for him without comment. She called 2 days later, at 7 in the evening. He had looked her up by then, because of course he had, and so he already knew. Nora Whitfield, 41 years old. CEO and majority shareholder of Whitfield Infrastructure Group, a company that did work in 6 countries and had its name on 3 airport terminals and roughly 150 miles of highway. She was in the news periodically, not the gossip kind of news, but the kind that ran in the business section above the fold, usually accompanied by photographs in which she looked like she was tolerating the camera as a professional courtesy. He had seen the photographs. They had not prepared him for the way she actually looked, which was less polished and more present than photographs suggested. Like a building that photographs as monumental, and turns out, up close, to have interesting textures. She asked if he would meet her. Not at her office, she was specific about that, but at a restaurant near Meridian, somewhere neutral and quiet, on Saturday if he could manage it. He asked what this was about. I'd like to discuss something with you, she said. A potential arrangement. Professionally. He was quiet for a moment. I already have 2 jobs, he said. I know, she said. And then, carefully. This would replace both of them. And it would pay significantly better. He had been stirring pasta on the stove, and he turned the burner down. Why? He said. Because you're qualified, she said. More than most people I have access to. And because I have a problem I need to address, and I've now seen how you respond to a situation that requires both restraint and competence simultaneously, under pressure, without preparation. He absorbed this. That's not nothing, she added. Most people fail at least one of those. Some fail all 3. He had told her his answer would be maybe, and that he'd confirm by Friday. He had then gone, and stood at the kitchen window for a long time, looking at the brick wall. While the pasta slightly overcooked, he confirmed by Friday. She was already there when he arrived, seated in a corner booth, back to the wall, with a clear view of both entrances. He noticed this the way you notice things that confirm a hypothesis. The restaurant was a mid-range Italian place, the kind with low lighting and checkered tablecloths that were not quite ironic. She was in a dark blazer, and no jewelry except a watch, and she was reading something on her phone with the focused calm of someone who does not perform patience. She put the phone away when he sat down. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Thank you for the pasta recommendation," he said. The owner seated me. Something shifted in her expression, not quite a smile, but the structural precedent for one. "Antonio owes me a favor. I may have redirected the runway project to accommodate his property line. That's a significant favor. I do significant work," she said, without arrogance. "Simply," they ordered. She didn't look at the menu. He studied his longer than necessary, partly because he was still recalibrating to the strangeness of the evening. What followed was one of the more unusual conversations of his adult life, which had included some genuinely unusual conversations. She did not waste time on preamble. She explained, dealing with a security problem that was not straightforward, not a physical threat. Or not only a physical threat, but something more complex, a pattern of events over the past 8 months, suggesting that someone with detailed knowledge of her movements, her schedule, and her associates was conducting a form of low-level, deniable harassment. Nothing provable, nothing that had produced the kind of incident that generated a police report, just pressure, steadily applied. She described it methodically, the way someone describes a problem they have examined from enough angles that they are no longer frightened by it, only focused. A shipping contract that should have been hers, lost to a competitor who knew, and could only have known. Her ceiling price going in, a keynote address at a conference where her speaking slot was suddenly double booked. The other party informed first, a building inspection at one of her renovation projects that flagged 3 code issues on a Monday morning when a 48-hour halt would have caused her to miss a financing window. That last one had cost $3 million to recover. Each incident, taken alone, was explicable. Together they had a grammar, a logic underneath the noise. "Your current people don't see it," Jack said. "They see the incidents," she said. "They're not reading the pattern, because they're treating each one as an event. They're looking at what happened, not at what was positioned to make it happen." She set her wine glass down. "Yes," she said, "exactly that." Jack thought about the lean man in the alley, angling toward the exit. About the way certain problems announced themselves not in what they did, but in where they stood before they moved. His team at Hartwell managed incidents. That was a different thing from managing the space incidents grew in. Her current head of personal security had responded the way most people respond to threats they can't see, by adding more of what they already had. More guards, more cameras, more protocol, layer on layer. The theory being that more presence created more coverage. "It's not working," she said. "Because the problem isn't quantity. The problem is that whoever is doing this understands how large-scale security systems function. They're operating in the negative space." Jack was listening with the quality of attention he had spent years developing, not just to the words but to the structure around them, the things being said by how something was phrased and what was not being said at all. "You need someone who can see the negative space," he said. "Yes," she said, "from inside it." "Exactly." He drank his water. "I'm a warehouse worker," he said. "You were a ranger for 11 years, she said. "You completed 2 deployments. 1 classified. You were attached to a unit that I believe, based on available information, ran counterintelligence operations as a primary function. Your discharge was voluntary. It was not the result of incapacity or conduct issues." She paused. "You are a warehouse worker because you chose a different kind of life. That's a different thing." He was quiet for a moment. "Why did you stop the VA appointments?" she asked. The question came from a different direction and landed differently than he expected. He looked at her. "My daughter needed me home on Thursday afternoons," he said. Nora looked at him for a long moment. Something moved through her expression, not pity, which would have been the wrong note, and which he would have felt immediately, but something that took the fact in and placed it where it actually belonged. He found, to his mild surprise, that he did not mind being seen accurately. It was rare enough to be its own strange relief. "The position I'm offering comes with medical coverage," she said. "Full family. As part of the package, not as a negotiating point." He looked at his fork. "I don't need to be rescued," he said. "I want to be clear about that." "I know," she said. "I'm not offering to rescue you. I'm offering to pay you what your skills are actually worth. Those are different transactions." He thought about Dennis at the warehouse. He thought about the vending machine eating his $1.50. He thought about Emma on the floor with the puzzle, missing Neptune. He thought about the sensation of his shoulder, catching that impact in the alley, and the fact that he had compensated correctly, automatically, 6 years after the injury, the body remembering what the mind had filed away. "I'll need to meet your team before I decide," he said. "Of course," she said. "And I won't work hours that compromise Emma's school schedule." "Agreed. And I want the scope of the job in writing before anything else happens." "Already prepared," she said, and produced a sealed envelope from her blazer pocket, and set it on the table between them. He looked at it. "You were confident," he said. "I was hopeful," she said. "There's a difference." A beat. "I am almost never hopeful. I find it an exhausting state to maintain, and an unreliable basis for decision-making. Tonight appears to be an exception." He looked up at her. Something in the corner of her expression shifted. Not a full smile, she didn't seem like someone who gave those away casually, but something underneath one, genuine and briefly unguarded. She looked away and reached for her wine, and he understood that he had just seen something she hadn't entirely intended to show him. He opened the envelope. "You were confident," he said. "I was hopeful," she said. "There's a difference." He went to the Whitfield Group offices the following Monday. He had not told anyone at Hartwell anything, because there was nothing to tell yet. He had not told Emma anything specific, only that he had a meeting about a possible new job, which she had received with the measured response of someone who would process this information overnight and return with questions in the morning. Her questions, when they came, were, was it safe? Was it during the day or at night? Did the company make something useful? He had said, mostly yes, both, and he believed so. She had seemed cautiously satisfied. The Whitfield Group occupied 7 floors of a glass tower on Grant Avenue, which was not the most prestigious address in the city but was close. Jack arrived in the clothes he wore to the security job because they were the best he had, and the lobby security desk gave him a visitor badge with the practiced neutrality of professionals who process hundreds of people a day and have calibrated their affect accordingly. He rode the elevator to the 14th floor. The receptionist was expecting him. The hallway he was walked down was long and quiet, the kind of space built to communicate something about the people who worked in it: clean lines, natural light, the low hum of systems functioning correctly. He was shown into a conference room. 3 people were waiting. Marcus, from the alley, he was introduced now as Marcus Webb, Director of Executive Security. A woman named Patricia Cole, General Counsel, who had the watchful economy of movement of someone who bills by the quarter hour, and a man named Daniel Sutter, Head of Corporate Intelligence, who had the quiet, still quality of someone who had learned that listening was more useful than talking. Jack sat down. He felt all 3 of them assess him in the first 30 seconds, and he assessed them back, and for a moment the room had the particular quality of a space where several people are deciding simultaneously whether they can work with the other people in it. Marcus went first. "Your background check cleared," he said. It was not said warmly. "Good," Jack said. "I cleared it." Something moved in Marcus's expression. Not hostility, something more interesting than that. A kind of attention. "What do you know about pattern analysis in physical security contexts?" Marcus asked. "Depends what you mean by physical security contexts," Jack said. "If you mean, can I assess a space for threat vectors and identify human behavioral anomalies against expected baselines? Yes. I have practical experience with that. If you mean the formal methodology your firm uses, I don't know it, but I can learn it." Patricia Cole wrote something down. "What happened in that alley?" Marcus said. "Walk me through it." Jack walked him through it. He was specific and unembellished, the way he had been trained to report. Time, position, observed behavior, assessed threat level, action taken, outcome. He did not editorialize. He did not describe how it felt. He stated what he had seen and what he had done. When he finished, the room was quiet for a moment. "The tattoo on your arm," Daniel Sutter said. It was the first thing he had said. The men who left recognized it. "Apparently," Jack said. "What unit?" Jack told him. Daniel Sutter nodded slowly. Something passed through his expression that was not quite respect, because it was too professional to be labeled, but occupied the adjacent space. "Miss Whitfield wants you to start in 2 weeks," Marcus said. Transition period, shadow rotation, briefing on current threat posture. "After 30 days, we reassess." "That works," Jack said. Marcus looked at him for another moment. "For what it's worth," he said, "the shoulder that you injured, the VA records show a complex rotator cuff issue, partially repaired. The way you moved in that alley, you compensated correctly. You've been managing it. That's not nothing." Jack was slightly surprised by this. "I've been doing the exercises," he said. Marcus nodded. "We have a physio on retainer. Worth seeing her." This was said with the practicality of someone managing an asset. Jack understood it as such, and found he did not mind. 3 weeks later, there was an event. The Whitfield Group hosted a quarterly stakeholders reception at the Meridian Club, which was a building with marble floors and an attitude about its own importance. Jack had been to the building's security assessment 2 days prior, and had submitted a written analysis that Daniel Sutter had read twice before filing. He was not there as a guest. He was working stationed at the east entrance, which was the secondary entrance, the one used by catering and late arrivals, and people who wanted to be noticed arriving rather than simply arriving. At 7:40, 3 men came to the east entrance, wearing the expressions of people with legitimate invitations who expect no difficulty. The difficulty was that their names were not on the list. Jack had the list. He had memorized it on the bus that morning, which was perhaps unusual behavior. But he had found it useful to have the list in his head rather than on a tablet he might need to look down at. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't have you here." The man in front, who was heavyset and wore the kind of watch that announces itself, looked at Jack with a specific brand of incredulity, reserved for people who are unaccustomed to being told no by someone in a security jacket. "I'm associated with the Brennan Group," the man said. "We're partners." "I'm sure you are," Jack said. "But I don't have your name. I'll need to call inside. I'm not going to wait while you can wait here," Jack said. "Or I can have someone come to you. Those are the options available." The man stared at him. Jack looked back at him steadily, with the unhurried patience of someone who has stood in worse places for much longer. He called inside. He described the situation with the precision he had started to develop for these contexts. He was told to hold. 45 seconds later, the door opened from the inside. Nora Whitfield stood in the doorway. She looked at the 3 men, then at Jack, and her expression contained several things that happened quickly and in sequence: recognition, assessment, decision. "Mr. Holloway," she said to the man with the watch, "your firm is no longer a partner of this group, as of last Thursday's notification. I believe your legal team received the correspondence. I'd ask you to leave the premises." The man with the watch went through several colors. Nora stepped back inside without waiting for a response, and the door closed. The 3 men left. Jack put his earpiece back in and looked at the street. Marcus materialized beside him approximately 30 seconds later. "Good call," he said. "Holloway's been trying to get FaceTime with her for a month. She didn't want to deal with it here." "Noted," Jack said. "You're going to be useful," Marcus said. It was not a compliment in the warm sense. It was a professional assessment. Jack appreciated it as such. Inside the event, he learned later, Nora had returned to her conversation without explaining where she had been for 90 seconds, and no one had asked. 6 months after the alley. It is an April morning, and the light through the window of the new apartment is nothing like the brick wall light. The new apartment has 2 actual bedrooms and a kitchen, with counter space and a window that faces a park, where the trees are doing what trees do in April, which is insist loudly on their own existence after months of being unconvincing. Emma wakes him at 7:15. "3 facts," she announces. He rolls over and puts a pillow over his face. "Go." She sits on the edge of the bed. 1. The Great Barrier Reef makes its own noise. Scientists can record it. Each reef has a distinct acoustic fingerprint. She pauses for appropriate weight. 2. There are more possible iterations of a chess game than there are atoms in the observable universe. 3. The word salary comes from the Latin word for salt, because Roman soldiers were sometimes paid in salt. He removes the pillow from his face. "Salt," he says. "Currency," she confirms. "Also, preservation." Salt was important. He sits up. His shoulder is better, not entirely fixed, not the shoulder of his 20s, but better than it was, which is enough. The physio has opinions about this that she delivers with the cheerful aggression of someone who finds dysfunction professionally interesting. "What's today?" he asks. Emma checks her watch, which is a real watch now, not the plastic one that broke in January, and recites, "Monday, Library Day." She has a report due Thursday on tectonic plates. She needs new pencils. The plant needs water. He gets up. The job is not simple, and some days it is heavy in ways that are hard to describe to people who haven't done work, where the weight is mostly information and attention rather than anything visible. He has mapped the negative space around Nora Whitfield's daily life, with the care of someone mapping unfamiliar terrain, not because he is told to, but because he has found, to his mild surprise, that he is very good at it, better than he was at the warehouse, where goodness went unremarked. Here it is remarked upon, precisely, professionally, without sentimentality. He and Marcus have arrived at a working relationship that resembles mutual respect more each week. They do not discuss it directly. They discuss operational assessments, coverage gaps, behavioral anomalies in access logs, the 17 different ways a pattern can be visible to someone looking for it and invisible to everyone else. Marcus has, twice, passed Jack's analysis up to Nora without attribution, and then told him afterward, which Jack understands as the highest available compliment. Daniel Sutter is teaching him the analytical frameworks he has been using on instinct for years without the formal vocabulary, which Jack finds satisfying in the way of discovering there is a word for something you have always known. Like learning the name of a bird you have watched your whole life. The thing doesn't change. You just know what to call it. Patricia Cole addressed him by his last name for the first 17 days, and then, without apparent ceremony, switched to his first. He took this as a signal. She is, he has learned, precise about everything. The distance she keeps from people is a professional tool, not a personality defect. And when she shortens it, it means something. He does not think about Nora Whitfield in uncomplicated ways, which is appropriate given the professional context, and which he manages with the same discipline he applies to everything else. He is aware that she is a specific kind of person, contained, precise, capable of a warmth she deploys sparingly and therefore effectively, and of a directness that she has apparently given up apologizing for. She does not perform ease. She is not performing anything. He finds this, in the context of people he has worked for, genuinely rare. She has not, for her part, treated him as a project or a charity, or anything other than what he is. Someone she hired because he is good at something she needs. He respects this more than he might have expected. He has worked for people who made their generosity a kind of weight, who gave things in ways that obligated the receiver, so that help arrived with a leash attached. Nora does not do this. What she gives clean. There was one moment, 3 weeks ago, when Emma had come to the office to be picked up after school because the babysitter had called in sick. She had sat in the waiting area with a book, and her serious expression, the one that made her look as though she was conducting a quiet field study of the world around her, and Nora had come through the lobby and stopped. "You must be Emma," she had said. Emma had looked up and done the quiet assessment that she performed on all new adults, running some internal evaluation that took about 3 seconds and produced a judgment she rarely shared. "You must be Miss Whitfield." "I am. My dad says you do important work." "I hope so," Nora had said. She had crouched slightly, which people often did when talking to Emma, as if reducing the physical distance would close whatever other distance existed. What work do you find important? Emma had considered this with genuine seriousness. Not performing consideration, actually thinking about it. The way she thought about all questions that seemed to her worth the effort. Understanding how things work, she had said. So you can make them better. Most things that are broken are only broken because nobody understood them well enough to fix them. Nora had been still for a moment. That's exactly right, she had said. And her voice had the quality of someone who has just heard something they already believed, confirmed from a direction they didn't expect. Jack had been watching from the hallway. He had stayed there. He had not said anything. He had filed it away the way his daughter had looked at Nora, the way Nora had looked at Emma. The small, specific realness of that exchange added it to the accumulating record of things he paid attention to without deciding what they meant yet. He was patient with meaning. It arrived when it arrived. The morning is April, and the trees in the park are insisting on themselves. Emma is eating cereal at the kitchen table, with a library book open beside her bowl, her chin propped on both fists, reading with the focused calm of a person solving something that matters. Neptune is no longer missing from the puzzle. They found it behind the radiator last month, dusty and pale, and entirely itself. Emma had held it up and examined it, and placed it in its correct position with the satisfaction of someone completing a fact. Everything has its place, she had said. Even when it's missing, Jack had agreed. Especially then, she had said, it is still early. The day is still ahead. There is nothing dramatic in any of this, no moment of singular triumph, no crowd to bear witness, no official accounting of what the last 6 months have become. The story that some people have constructed around that night in October, the heroic father, the grateful billionaire. The second chance is not wrong exactly, but it misses something. It makes the thing too large, too clean, too resolved. It turns it into a beginning and an end, with nothing messy in between. What it actually was is harder to describe. A set of choices, made in sequence. A night when he turned around instead of walking on, and everything that followed from that turn, not because it was destined, not because he was extraordinary, but because he was there, and paying attention, and had not yet been entirely persuaded that caution was the same thing as wisdom. Emma says something. He is at the window, watching the park, and he turns. You're thinking, she says. It is not a question. Occasionally, he says. She looks at him with the gray eyes that see more than they announce. He considers telling her all of it, the full version, the one with the honest weight of how close they came to the other story, the one where he walked on, where the alley was just an alley, where nothing changed. He considers it and decides that it will keep. There will be other mornings, other conversations. She is 8 years old and already asking the right questions. About how things work, he says. She considers this, turning back to her book. That's a good thing to think about, she says. Just a morning. A father and a daughter. And the ordinary, extraordinary fact of continuing. Jack makes coffee. Emma turns a page. Outside, the trees do not stop.